When it comes to persisting in your manifestation, there's so much advice out there on how to persist. And for the record, I do think it's all good information. It really, like I've been mentioning, it does depend on the person and if they're resonating with that piece of information at that time. But for me personally, I've struggled a little bit when it came to effective persisting. And what I mean by this is seeing actual results from doing focusing work, whether that was via affirmations or visualization or meditation or whatever type of imaginable thing that I was doing in order to change and align myself in order to see results in my physical reality. As I mentioned in my previous video, before I got really good at manifesting, it felt like I was suffering in my 3D reality, or it felt like I was almost like suffering through my 3D reality. Kind of like a train, like plowing through the 3D reality or any form of contrast that would come up in my 3D reality. And it just wasn't an effective method. The only time I really saw results when I was doing this like train method of just going through my 3D reality and persisting in my focusing work was when I physically exhausted myself out to the point of just not focusing anymore, and then I would get the thing that I wanted. When I was like literally exhausted and just not focusing. In this video, I want to go over 2 more tweaks that I made when it comes to persisting. They were so tiny, but they made such a big difference in the accuracy of my manifestations. The first thing we're going to go over is a tiny trap that I fell into when it came to persisting. And the second thing we're going to go over is a more effective way of persisting that isn't like the train method, where you feel like you're suffering through your 3D or suffering through any form of contrast that might come up. And as a very quick pre-reminder before we get into these 2 things, always remember you are never changing your 3D reality, you're only ever changing yourself, and specifically your own alignment to the 3D reality in order to see the reflection that you want from your inner world or your inner essence. So let's talk about this tiny little trap that I accidentally fell into when it came to persisting. This particular trap is centered around the idea of belief. Now, I know that belief is a very controversial topic within the manifesting community, but I want to talk about what I realized within my own manifestation journey, and hopefully this tiny tweak will help you when it comes to persisting, and specifically around this concept of belief. As I mentioned, in my previous method of persisting like a train, like through my 3D reality and through these 3D circumstances that would come up telling me I don't have what I want, the feeling of belief felt like one of 2 things. The first feeling was this feeling of certainty that I would try and convince myself that I'm going to definitely get exactly what I want if I keep persisting. Because as we all know, it's universal law. If I keep persisting in my inner reality, then it's inevitable that I'm going to get results in my 3D reality. This feeling was very much future-based, and like I said, it was centered around this feeling of certainty. It was like I was trying to convince myself of this certain thing because I understood and I resonated with that universal law, but I was like trying to convince myself of it in the moment, if that makes sense, of the certainty. I'd either feel that or I'd feel the second type of feeling when it came to persisting. The second feeling I would feel was centered around the present moment, and what would end up happening was I would persist in a way that was like I was ignoring and not acknowledging what was actually happening in the 3D reality. And more specifically, it was like I was trying to convince myself that the things that were happening around me, like the 3D reality, were not actually happening. Or like I would go off of the advice of the 3D reality is not real, only your imagination is real, persist in your imagination, and eventually the 3D will show up in that way. Whatever you're holding in your imagination. So I'd be going around trying to convince myself that I just have to live in my imagination and not really and pretend that the things that were happening in my 3D reality weren't actually happening. But this made me feel very delusional. And for the record, I do subscribe to the idea of being delusional when it comes to selecting the dreams that you want to experience in this world. But actively trying to convince yourself of something that's happening when it's not actually happening in a present moment is not an effective technique for me unless I was playing a form of pretend and I liked playing that form of pretend. It felt good to me, and I wasn't necessarily using that form of pretend to say that what's actually happening was actually happening. It was just me enjoying a type of focusing work in that moment for the sake of it, rather than trying to make something happen in the 3D reality. And like I said, those 2 feelings centered around the idea of belief made me, I'm going to call them the train method. They made me feel like I was just like ignoring the 3D reality or trying to convince myself of something that wasn't actually happening. But when I stepped back and did some self-analysis with this, I realized something pretty interesting when it came to the train method. I realized that all I was trying to do was trying to convince myself of something that I had not actually physically experienced yet. So the tiny tweak that I made when it came to this feeling of belief in my persisting work was I started persisting in possibility, not certainty, and not delusionality, which I don't think is a word, but we're using it. But oh my gosh, this tiny tweak changed everything for me. And here's why. Now, okay, for me personally, I'm not someone who likes to manifest with a lot of emotion. I'm more of a selector and then an allower, if that makes sense. And I tend to gravitate towards information that is more logic-based rather than emotion-based. Now, that being said, I am hyper aware of my vibrational essence within my own being. But it's not, and I know that there's an argument that emotions can be feelings and vice versa sometimes. But for me personally, I don't go searching for emotion, so I'm not like, oh, this makes me feel happy because, and then dive into like the emotional reasoning behind it, or this makes me feel sad because whatever. For me, it's more like I like this or I do not like this. So yes, you can argue that that is emotion, but I bring this up because, like I said, being hyper aware of where I'm at in relation to my 3D reality is very important for me, and it's how I align myself in different ways in order to experience the things that I want. So although I'm not diving into the reason why something made me sad, I am diving into the reason I did not get the thing that I wanted. And if the feeling of sadness comes up, I'm not like resisting it per se, but I'm like not using it to understand why I'm getting certain results. But when it comes to this particular tweak and in the category of belief, I realized that the reason why I wasn't seeing results when it came to persisting like a train was because I was trying to convince myself of certainty. I was trying to convince myself that something would actually happen. But here's the thing, I believe in the manifestation process, mostly because I have so much experience with it and seeing consistent results. And I do believe in the universe or God or whatever you want to call it is a reflection of my direct attention and focus. But regardless of the amount of experience I have with manifesting and my belief that the universe will reflect exactly who I am on the inside, I never fully believe that I'm going to get my manifestation before I actually get it. The only time I fully believe that I'm going to get something is when I've actually gotten it and physically experienced it. So I tweaked it. I tweaked it to possibility. I'm like, you know what? I don't believe that I'm actually going to get the thing that I want. Even though I believe in universal law, even though I believe in the manifestation process, I don't actually believe that I'm going to get this specific manifestation until I actually receive it, until I actually get to touch it and experience it with one of my 5 senses. And I let that be okay. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to persist in possibility. I do believe that what I am focusing on is possible for me. It's not happening at this exact moment, but I do believe that it is possible for me. This form of persisting made everything feel lighter, it felt easier, and every time I caught myself accidentally persisting in certainty, I reminded myself, I'm okay with not actually believing this until I actually receive it. But I still believe in the possibility of me receiving the thing that I wanted. The way this felt was very much like I would do some sort of focusing work, whether that was like visualization or affirmations or whatever type of focusing work I was using for that particular manifestation. It was like I would focus on having the thing that I wanted in my imagination, and then I would come out of that focusing work and remind myself, yes, I believe in that possibility. I believe that what I just imagined or what I just affirmed is possible for me. And because I gave more allowance and acceptance to what was my actual circumstances in my 3D reality, the faster they went away. I was no longer trying to convince myself that they weren't there, and I was no longer trying to convince myself that I was definitely going to get something that I didn't fully believe I was going to get. Because remember, the quote is not circumstances aren't there. The quote is circumstances do not matter. They are irrelevant. They are meaningless. And although belief is such a controversial topic, like you don't have to believe your affirmations, you don't have to believe in what you're saying is going to actually happen, or believing that what you're focusing on is actually going to happen. All they mean by belief and like not needing to believe is just believing in the certainty of what you're imagining. Because I mean, we have 2 minds. We have a higher mind and then we have our physical mind. Our physical mind is only here to experience the here and now. That's all it can do. The higher mind is the one in charge of like, that can see everything. And it's you. It You don't need to convince your higher mind of possibility. You just need to use your linear mind to select the thing that you want and then stop resisting the thing you do not want. Which leads me to the second thing I want to bring up in this video, which is a more effective way of persisting. In addition to that tiny tweak of persisting in possibility rather than certainty or delusionality. What I also realized from all of this was effective persisting is a lot less about the train method, where you're just like I said, blasting through the 3D reality and all this contrast, pretending it's not there or pretending you're definitely going to get your manifestation. And it's more like a hopping method. And what I mean by this hopping method is, instead of becoming blind to your 3D circumstances and your current reality, it's more like a balancing act between focusing on having the thing that you want in your imagination and not resisting your current reality. So it's like focus, stop resisting. Focus, stop resisting. Because as I said before, what you resist persists. If you're resisting your current reality, you're just selecting it. How do you stop resisting something? You accept it and you allow it. Now, this does not mean that you actually like the thing that's happening in your 3D reality. You don't have to like it. It's just more about letting it be there and existing, not trying to necessarily change that thing that you are accepting or allowing. There's a certain level of integration and allowance that's needed within your 3D reality in order for you to naturally shift to what you're focusing on. The way I view manifesting is with two goals in mind, and I'm eventually going to create a video on how I personally manifest, but the way I essentially see manifesting is I am currently selecting for reality B. This is the reality I want, where I have my desire. I am currently in reality A. So in order for me to move or naturally be moved to reality B, I need to first select reality B, and that's where I'm doing my focusing work through my imagination. However, I choose to focus on already having the thing that I want, but I'm still in reality A. As I'm focusing on reality B in my imagination, I'm still in reality A. So the way that I let go of reality A is by allowing it and letting it be there and whatever circumstances are in reality A. And what this lets me do is let go of reality A, and then I am naturally moved into reality B with my desire. Because if I'm resisting all of the circumstances in my current reality, or even just resisting the reality itself, I'm just gonna keep selecting it. So I have this like weird process of selecting with my imagination and then integrating myself back into my current reality, so I am no longer resisting it, and then naturally being moved from that vibrational alignment to reality B. And as we know, the how is not your job, so it does take a certain level of trust. But my whole point with this video is that if you're persisting like a train, you might accidentally be persisting in your current reality. You may accidentally be selecting it still without meaning to, simply because you're trying to pretend that things aren't actually there, or because you're trying to pretend that you're actually going to get exactly what you want when you haven't even experienced it yet. The whole point of you doing manifesting in the first place is to use the universe, higher mind, God, whatever, as a reflection of you. You're never trying to change this. You are just changing your alignment to this. And then what will happen is you will naturally be moved to the thing you're actually focusing on in your imagination, which is reality B. And as I said before, I know there's so many different manifestation processes out there. Some do tell you to persist in a very chronic manner, like robotic affirmations. For the record, you can if you want, but if you're going to persist in a chronic manner like that, make sure you're persisting in possibility rather than certainty. Because if you start persisting in certainty, you might accidentally start creating more and more resistance to your 3D reality, because when you come out of that, or when you are looking around in your 3D reality, you're gonna see that it's not there yet, and you'll start doubting yourself. You'll start being like, well, I must not be focusing correctly. Then I have to go harder and like focus for longer or whatever. And that's not necessarily the case. What's actually happening is you're resisting the 3D reality and therefore continuing to select it. Like I said, it's more of a selection method and then letting go method. Selection method, letting go method. And the biggest, at least in my personal journey, my biggest problem that I ran into when it came to not continuing to select the reality I didn't want was because I was resisting it on some level and therefore selecting it. Keep in mind, although when you stop selecting reality A and you're naturally moved into reality B, what you're actually going to be experiencing is receiving your desire in your current reality, because you're always in just the present moment. Although our linear mind likes to organize information into like past, present, and future, as we know, that's not necessarily the case. Time doesn't really exist. I personally don't think time exists at all. All that exists is right now. It's like the past, present, and future are all in this like bubble. And the reason why the past and the future exist is because they're projections of our imagination. So integrating yourself back into just the present moment and allowing it for what it is, and remembering that circumstances do not matter. Not that they're not there, they just don't matter. You're going to experience the thing that you want or be moved to reality B in the present moment. So integrating yourself back into the 3D reality is helpful because that's where you're going to get your manifestation. Whatever technique you use to focus on having the thing that you want already, keep using it, especially if it works for you. If you're a fan of affirmations, keep using affirmations. If you're a fan of visualization, use visualizations. Some people are really good with manifesting via emotions. It's incredible. They like use their body to like get things. It's so cool. I'm not one of those people, but like I said, it's like their own superpower. If you're one of those people, keep doing it. Like, that's awesome. But keep in mind, you don't want to be resisting anything. You do not want to be resisting your current circumstances, and you don't want to be resisting your current reality or making yourself feel like you're delusional. If you feel any type of resistance to the way that you're doing something, you may just want to tweak little things. Keep persisting, but persist in a more effective manner that works for you. Like I said, these two understandings of persisting in possibility and understanding that I don't need to persist chronically, I just have to select and then stop resisting, select, stop resisting, select, stop resisting. Both of them work so much more effectively within my own being. And you can use both of these tactics no matter what type of focusing work you use. From my perspective, I don't even think that the focusing work is ever really the problem, unless you're accidentally thinking or focusing or selecting on something you do not want, or you're not actually focusing on having the thing you want already. Some people accidentally focus on how they're going to, like, the journey to getting what they want by accident, and therefore you're just going to keep getting more like hows, like the middle parts, rather than the actual having of it. But I hope this video made sense. Like I said, these two tiny tweaks, they worked for me. They may work for you. Try them out if you're struggling with persisting and you're not actually seeing results. And let me know what you think about this in the comments below, because I am curious to hear your perspective on this. But that is all for now. Until next time, keep creating, everyone, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.